Welcome to Building Wealthy Habits podcast. Now, this features content and conversations with me, Randy Barkley, Jeremiah Lee, along with Laura Lee. On this podcast, we share financial advice from a team of certified financial planners, including a California licensed attorney, an MBA professional with collective experience of over 40 years.
This is episode 2 of a 3-part series. We're talking about short-term rentals. This week we have 2 fantastic real estate agents, Simone Nepper and Brooke Miller, and they are helping us walk through what do you need to look for if you're getting a short-term rental. What are some pitfalls that you need to avoid? This episode is for anybody who's interested in short-term rentals, and we hope you enjoy the content.
All right. Today we're kicking off part 2 of a 3-part series talking all about short-term rental properties. But for today's chat, we wanted to bring on some real estate experts. So these are not only close friends of ours, these are real estate professionals. So first I want to start by introducing Simone Nepper. She's an agent with Coldwell Banker in Lake Arrowhead area. She's been working with Coldwell for 8 years and has been voted one of the top 10 agents in her area for 5 years in a row. Did I get that right?
You did. Yeah.
All right. All right. Welcome, Simone. Also joining us is Brooke Miller. So she has over 18 years experience as a real estate broker and estate planning attorney, and a decade plus as an advocate for adoptive and foster families. Brooke merged her passions in founding Home for Good, a charitable real estate model, and has been honored as a top 25 producer in Orange County and a member of the top 250 nationally recognized real estate agents since 2020. Did I get that right, Brooke?
Sounds right.
All right. Welcome, ladies. We are so glad that you could join us today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So part of the fun that we are kicking off is this is a 3-part series. The first one we did on kind of the financial aspect of owning a short-term rental, what that looks like, why maybe you'd want to, why maybe you might not want to. And for today, we're looking into, well, if you decide you want to, how do you get it? How do you find it? How do you secure a property that's really going to be a good fit for what you need? And we hopefully have a good conversation about finding out what Lake Arrowhead or Orange County or any other area might look like to try and find a short-term rental that fits, that's the right property that's geared for that. And so hopefully you guys can share all your expertise with us as we dive in.
So we thought to kick us off, we would role play a little bit. So if Jeremiah and I were prospective buyers and we came to you in the geographies that you each represent, and we said that we were interested in buying a short-term rental property, we were considering it, what would be some of the first questions that you would throw our direction?
Shall I go first?
Go for it.
Okay. So our area is a resort town, Lake Arrowhead and surrounding areas. We're a mountain town. And so a lot of people purchase a home with a dual purpose. They want it to be a personal vacation home for themselves and then also an investment property or something that at least pays for itself. So my first question to you would be, is this purely an investment property, or is this something where you want personal use out of it and then kind of just have it pay for itself? And then we would get into the nitty-gritty of what exactly are you looking for? Do you want to be close to the lake? Would you prefer a more quiet area? And all those sorts of things, the criteria of your search, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think the first question I would ask is just what's drawing you to the short-term rental conversation in the first place? You know, is it purely the financial return? They do tend to have a higher return than maybe a standard investment property, but that's based on a lot of various factors, of course, that have to be carefully considered. Is it something that you want to use as a hybrid for personal use, where your family would vacation and then also you would have some additional rental income? A lot of families in Orange County also look at the possibility of a hybrid with their own personal residence. So maybe a junior ADU or a standard ADU on their property. So I think just setting the expectations, you know, is there a romantic notion to it? Is there a practical need for it? Is there purely financial motivation, and really ironing out if the short-term rental market is going to be a good fit for actually meeting your expectations?
So I love both those questions. If let's just try on for size if we answered them one in each way. Like, at first we said, yeah, we want to enjoy it as vacation, option for our family. But the other time of the year, we'd love to consider like a short-term rental. Kind of how would that alter sort of the next steps in the process versus us saying like, no, this is purely an investment property. We have no plans for personal use.
Well, one rule that I would personally apply to both scenarios, and this is a rule that we've applied to our own home purchases, whether we're buying a personal residence or whether we're buying an investment property personally, certainly something I pass on to clients as advice. Don't buy something that you would not personally live in and or personally rent out, right? So if there's something that you are drawn to, you say, I would like to take a vacation there, or I would like to spend time there. Maybe it's not purely vacation. Short-term rental market in Orange County is also driven by other factors like proximity to a university. Maybe there's visiting parents, proximity to maybe high-end hospitals or various amenities that are outside of maybe a standard box for short-term rentals, where you think not just vacation, but practical needs and resources that are in demand. But at the very end of the day, if it's not something that you wouldn't want to live in or rent out, you're going to have a harder time convincing someone else to also consider it worth their time and money as a rental. So I think that's a really good threshold consideration from the very get-go.
Yeah, I would agree. I think certainly if it's more personal use, then that definitely comes into play for sure. You want to be able to enjoy it, and usually that's something that someone else would enjoy. Sometimes people have really quirky taste, and then it isn't something that someone else is going to enjoy.
It's not very marketable.
Yeah. So if it is something where it really is more investment driven, in our area specifically, you have to have something that makes you special to stand out, to do well in the short-term rental market, because our short-term rental have increased in number and volume in here, especially during the 2020 pandemic craze. And so our short-term rental market up here really has reached a saturation level to where if you don't have something special about your property to make you stand out, you're not going to do well. And maybe if you're wanting to just mostly use it for personal use, then that's not a big deal. You don't have to do well. You could just rent it, 10 weekends a year, and that'd be fine. But if you really want it to be an investment property and see a good return on your investment, you have to either have really interesting architecture, great proximity to the lake and the village, or really great interior design that makes your place stand out, because there are just so many to choose from in our area right now.
So you have such high concentration. That's an interesting point, though, too. So, Brooke, in your market, regarding short-term rental properties, COVID, post-COVID, what was the impact there?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think COVID affected, there's not a single market that COVID didn't affect, of course. And I think in the last year or so, we've seen some of the bounce back from the hit on the short-term market, the short-term rental market. So, I think one of the greatest pieces of advice I could offer someone looking to enter into the short-term rental market in Orange County is that everything is city by city. So doing as much homework in advance, as much of the heavy lifting and research in advance. It doesn't mean you have to do that alone. It could be with a real estate professional who's helping guide and identify some of the questions to ask. But there is not a one-size-fits-all rules or regulations. So as an example, we're based in the city of Orange. We're right in the Old Town Orange section. Our regulations from Old Town versus something that's outside of Old Town is very different. Same city, but different neighborhoods. Regulations between Orange and between the city of Anaheim. We're neighboring cities, but the regulations are very different. And so having that advanced knowledge before you fall in love with the idea of a short-term rental, either in concept or a specific property, knowing if there are any short-term rental permits available in that city, knowing what kind of requirements they have. Some are going to have stricter ADA requirements. Some are going to have stricter parking requirements. City of Orange right now actually is saturated. There are no short-term rental permits available in the city of Orange right now, but maybe there's some planning that could be done for someone that's looking down the road. So as an example, we have long-term investment rental properties here in Orange, And about a year or two ago, I put us on the short-term rental list because it's a future possibility of how we might use that property. At the time, I think we were number 120 or something on the list. And that might feel a little futile, but current day conversation for the city of Orange, they're having a lot of budget constraints and challenges. And one of the possible considerations is doubling the short-term rental permits allowed. And I think that would put another 150 on the table. So all of a sudden, being number 120 on the list sounds pretty good.
Sounds not too bad. Yeah.
Not too bad. So there are some times where you're planning for like a now and a not yet. Anything over 30 days for a rental property is not considered short term. So there are a lot of people that are also appealing with their rental properties to a month by month. Again, travel nurses or different proximity to various amenities that are a little bit different than vacation. And then setting themselves up for success if and when short-term rental permits do become available. So again, Anaheim has a different kind of set of regulations. They've got more permits because they're closer to something like Disneyland. Orange County also has like OC Vibe is coming in the next couple years. That's going to drastically impact not only the homes that are being built and the things that are being considered, but I'm very confident that short-term rental permits and things like that will have to be expanded because the demand is going to be so much higher in the city of Orange once there's this, elevated venue that's going to be bringing in a completely different draw of demographics.
I like that. Do your research, right? Like ignorance isn't bliss. And I know for like Arrowhead too, they put kind of a moratorium, if you will, on short-term rental permits because there was so much saturation in the market. Now they've, I think, alleviated that for the time being. But you two, as real estate professionals, like you probably have to keep your like ear to the ground to hear kind of what's going on so that you can inform your clients. But it's, they should also inform themselves, right? Do research.
Absolutely. Yeah. That definitely is a changing and shifting game all the time. For us, we're an unincorporated area, so we don't have to deal with the city. Our only government entity that we do deal with is the county. And you do still have to get a short-term rental permit through the county. And those fees are always changing and the rules are always changing. So, we're always at all those meetings and, listening to know what's on the horizon for government changes for permits.
That's great. I have a question kind of on that. I mean, if someone was looking at Arrowhead and they found someone like you, Simone, or Brooke, if they're looking at Orange County and found someone like you guys are in this space, you're realtors that are staying up to this conversation. So you would say, hey, look for this city, not this city. You know how to guide them. If you guys were looking to maybe buy something in the Bay Area or, something that is just not your area, like how do people find a real estate agent that knows that area? I can see people saying, hey, I know somebody from Ventura. They're going to help me buy something in San Diego. And they probably don't know San Diego as well. So I guess as either any of our clients or anyone listening, like how do you find a real estate agent in that area that would really know the things that you guys know in your local areas?
Well, yeah, I think, for us, we probably have our own personal network of realtors that we know. And so we would ask around. But honestly, if I were just a person on the street, I would go to Yelp. I think Yelp is a really, really good place to find people. And a lot of my clients find me on Yelp. So that's honestly where I would start. I think, Zillow and some of those other websites also have reviews, but I find that the Yelp platform is a little more authentic and transparent. And so I think Yelp is a really good spot to start to find a realtor. It's unconventional, but it is a good place.
Yeah. Brooke, what would you say?
I'd say 90% of our job is very relational and very relationship driven. And so I would first turn to someone that you do have a relationship with within your local market that you trust, that you say, gosh, if you were in the Bay Area, this is who I would ask. I want to know your insight, and start there and ask them if they have relationships that they trust that they could leverage on your behalf in the area and the market that you're wanting to target. If they don't, then they can still be a great resource to connect you to great resources or Yelp platforms or review platforms. Reviews are they're a huge credit to any agent, to have a client go out and take their time to say kind words. Don't take those lightly. Reviews are such a wonderful way to learn about an agent and learn about see what's being reviewed. What matters to you? If someone says, gosh, this person was so fun, that's great. But maybe you're not looking for a fun agent. Maybe you're looking for We want to look for those who are, this person was a great negotiator. They really felt well represented. I really felt, their knowledge was really a comfort. Look for the things that matter to you, to really zero in on the good fit for the review if you don't have a personal relationship that can leverage and point you in the right direction.
Got it. I love that. I know we steered off a little bit from the agenda, so thanks for hanging on there for our roller coaster. But let's get back to it. We had a couple other questions. So going back to that role play situation, we've identified, let's say Jeremiah and I are looking for a short-term rental property. It's purely an investment property. What are some of the characteristics in a property that you would prioritize when you're considering it for investment short-term rental? And what are some of the things that you foresee as potential pitfalls? Don't choose a property that has X.
Well, I think that one of the greatest rarities, especially in Orange County right now, is any property with significant lot size, which is going to give you the greatest amount of flexibility because you can look at an existing residence on the property and also consider greater flexibility for something like additions of a junior ADU or a standard ADU. And you can really capitalize on some of the friendlier regulations right now that are statewide. So statewide, there's a mandate to encourage cities to increase housing opportunities. And so certain things like parking requirements that used to be a little bit more strict have been eased up on a statewide level. So if the city is leaning into that as well and making it more friendly for development, then there can be some great opportunities to look at not just what already exists, but what you could cultivate if there's a lot size that permits it. But again, that's in context to it also being in a location that you feel like there's amenities that would draw short-term interest. And I would avoid HOAs as a general. Those are going to be a lot more prohibitive, generally speaking, for short-term rental opportunities, even if all the other amenities and even if the lot size otherwise accommodated it.
I never thought about that. Makes total sense. No HOAs. Okay.
Well, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There's some that are very, very friendly to that. But one of the things that I would caution with the short-term rental market and HOAs is those regulations can change with the vote of the board. So even if it currently might be permitted, it might change a lot faster and with a lot less forewarning than, for instance, like a city zoning or a municipality regulation that would affect your long-term return on the property.
Got it.
Oh, good, Brooke. Wow.
I
Sometimes I
know stuff. I think all the time, but okay. You too, Simone.
Yeah, so our area obviously is a mountain region. It's mountainous, which means there's hills, and we have 4 seasons. So in addition to those things I mentioned earlier about architecture, interior design, or proximity to the lake and the village, accessibility is a big one for us. So up here, we'll have access roads that aren't county maintained, which means they don't get plowed in the winter. We have a lot of homes that are only off of access roads. And so it makes it a little trickier to get to the house in the winter because you have to hire a private plow guy to plow the road. We also have some homes that have really steep driveways, and it can be very intimidating for what we like to call a flatlander. And so
raise your hand if you're a flatlander.
Yeah, right.
Wannabe mountain person. You're a hybrid.
Yeah, I'm formerly known as a flatlander. So that's a big one. And often those homes that are on less accessible roads or have really steep driveways are more affordable. So they're really tempting. And but they can be really difficult when it plays out practically for your guests to access the home. So that's a big one for us that people don't always think about. And the photos don't always show. And that's why it's really helpful to have a local realtor that can either drive by it for you or already know the inventory and know this house is a no-go. You're not going to be able to get up that driveway.
Now, I know specifically in Lake Arrowhead, a lot of the properties don't necessarily have air conditioning because the weather stays so tepid or whatever. And so I know there's heating, for pretty much every home, but is that a factor? Like for a short term, would you recommend hey, it would be ideal if this home had air conditioning?
Totally. Yeah, that's totally something. Most of our homes are ducted for forced heating. And so it's fairly easy to add an air conditioning unit. So I wouldn't necessarily write the house off completely. You can add AC. And then a lot of our homes also up here are adding mini split units that are, it's a fairly easy improvement to do to a home.
Okay.
But for sure, I think air conditioning is important for a short-term rental. You want your guests to be comfortable and you have the option to be able to change the temperature to their desired temperature.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about some pitfalls? What about some things that you're like, oh, this would not make an ideal short-term rental property?
I think I see the pitfalls more sometimes in the expectations of, let's say, for instance, someone's doing their budget and they're thinking, I'm going to rent this house out all 365 days a year. And so therefore, I'm going to be raking in the cash. And so having a realistic expectation of what the vacancy rates are, that would be fair to expect for that area. Again, that's going to be area by area. And maybe even, some homes will have a history that you can lean on a little bit, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to play out to your future. So being really realistic with that budget, I think, is a pitfall to be careful about. And related to that is really being honest about the management aspect. Is this something you plan on self-managing or you plan on outsourcing to a management team? And if so, do you have that team identified? Do you feel like you take care for your home and your guests the same way that you would? So just having those kinds of conversations ahead of time instead of getting into the property and then realizing, oh, this is a lot of work. I don't know if I want to be the one managing the rental calendar and responding to inquiries and refreshing the linens and, but if you haven't factored that budget into the line item to have someone else do that, then that can be a big disappointment. So
but you're teeing this up perfect. Next week, we're going to talk all about hospitality, but what goes hand in hand in that is that management strategy because, and this kind of brings us to our last question. I don't know if we've identified clearly for the listeners, but both of you also own short-term rental properties. So in your own personal experience, what have been some of the biggest challenges and or rewards from owning short-term rental property?
Yeah, we do own our own, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy the hosting process, but I would kind of, echo what Brooke was saying. I would say it's a very hands-on process. And I think a lot of my clients who live in areas like Orange County or San Diego and are planning on purchasing a short-term rental up here don't necessarily realize that. They think we're going to buy it and it's just going to be this automatic thing that runs on its own. And so from my experience of managing a short-term rental, we have 2 factors in our property that make it a little more desirable. It's close to the lake and it's an A-frame. And people love that when they're coming to the mountains. But the Airbnb market slowed down significantly in 2023, or the short-term rental market. And so even with those 2 factors, we had to lower our prices to be able to, get our bookings up. And so being hands-on has definitely helped us with that because I'm able to do things like personal touches, welcome baskets, that sort of thing. Every time I have a guest check in, I am in there myself doing a walkthrough, making sure it's ready and welcoming for those people. And so if you're not able to do that, if you don't live here full time, you have to make sure you get a management company, someone that you really trust, who has the same eye for detail that you would have, to make sure when your guests show up, they feel completely welcomed, to help you stand out above the crowd, get you those really great reviews, and to keep those bookings coming. Because if you don't have that, I've seen in our market area homes that, are kind of on that track of like, we're just going to let it take care of itself. And those reviews start showing up. You won't hit that algorithm sweet spot of being at the top of the list. You're going to be bumped to the bottom. So I think you have to go in eyes wide open, knowing it's going to take some work, and it's not just something that you can put on the back burner and it's going to take care of itself.
Yeah, I like that you commented on the hands-on process and literally maybe being within close proximity or hiring someone who is within close proximity that can do that work for you, especially in your area when the winter months hit and you've got to get those driveways, cleared, and you've got to get, walkways cleared. It's like you need to know the local people so they can come help you, the local vendors. So
right. But then knowing that if you're going to have to hire a management company, that obviously affects your income margins and your return on investment. So you got to kind of run all those numbers before you make the decision to go for it.
Yep. Brooke, what would you say? Challenges and rewards?
Well, I think there's no better feeling than having someone else pay a mortgage on your property. So,
Right? I love that.
That's a dream. And it's fun when you get to see that dream fulfilled, even if it's just a portion of the mortgage that's being paid, through the investment strategies, whether it's short-term or long-term rental that you're aiming for. I think that really is something that positions families for such greater generational wealth. And so we have a 4-year-old, and, we're not necessarily budgeting candidly. We haven't fully budgeted for, college and the different things that may or may not still exist when she hits that life stage. But we've got our investment properties, and I will tell you, there's great joy to take her. That's her college fund, to take her. Sometimes she'll help me with turnover even. And she's already getting the vision for something that is helping serve someone else's needs, but also serving our own family too. And I think one of the long-term rewards that's really wonderful for families to think about is how it sets you up for something in the future. Maybe you buy a short-term rental property again. I think there's an important value to say, make it something you would be willing to live in or willing to rent yourself. But maybe it's not something that you envision holding on to for, 10, 20, 30 years. Maybe it just sets you up for the next opportunity. The 1031 exchange laws are really friendly to being able to turn that investment over into another type of investment property. And long-term down the road, I'll throw out a fun idea that we're circulating in our own family. We have investment properties here in Orange, but if we wanted to convert them to a place that we may look to retire someday, let's dream big and say we're going to go to Hawaii, then we could 1031 exchange an investment property there. And so long as it's an investment property for 2 years and meets all those regulations, if in the future after that we wanted to convert it to a personal residence, we have that freedom to do so, which is a really huge benefit that people don't always think. Like right now, you could set yourself up not only to have part of your mortgage paid, or maybe all of it, depending on your budget, but to also set you up for really great opportunities and exchanges in the future. Or maybe you convert that to a property that your own kid is renting and living out of in their college days, wherever they choose to live, if it's not in the property that you started when you were 4 years old. So I think those are some of the rewards that we're seeing in real time and really enjoying.
I love it. I love it that you brought up the 1031 exchange. We're going to have to touch on that again, too. And for our listeners, you've got the benefit of having 2 attorneys here that have walked through probably several 1031 exchanges in their lives. But we are at time, ladies. I feel like we could go on and on. There's so much. There's just a wealth of knowledge that you both have, as well as just being excellent at what you do. So thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us. I think I speak for both myself and Jeremiah. Jeremiah, wrap us up.
Perfect. Thank you both for coming. We will have more of this in the future.
Thank you.
Guys,
Thanks for having us.
fun chatting.
We have a few more things to let you know about before we go. Podcast reviews really help us to serve more people and get this information into the hands of the people who need it. Please leave us a review. Even if it's not 5 stars, we welcome the feedback.
And we invite you to let us know what topics you would like to hear more about, or what would benefit the people in your life who you're closest to. We have more resources online. Those resources are designed to help you share this great information easily with people in your life. To access those resources, please visit tricoreadvisors.com.
Often we hear from clients that they wish they had talked to us sooner. If that's you, we'd be thrilled to see how financial planning can benefit your life. Email us at contact@tricoreadvisors.com or simply click on the link in the show notes.
This show was produced by Graham Gardner at Model FA. Find out more about how to create a podcast for your financial planning business by visiting modelfa.com. We love creating content that's useful, resourceful, and maybe even a little entertaining. We want to make this mega universe of financial topics and advice applicable and helpful to your life.
Remember, at Tricord Advisors, we are your future's best ally.